Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in Los Angeles, California. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. I hope you had a good weekend. I've been taking Sundays off from Zoo Nerd, so I won't be broadcasting on Sundays. Yeah, the other 6 days of the week, you can expect me to be here at 2:30, Monday through Saturday. Today's Critter Chat is an amazing animal, one that has captured the attention of people from early on when they first discovered these big, great, amazing animals in the forest of Africa. Today we are talking about gorillas. They are the largest of all apes, and they have been divided into two species. So in each of those species, they're called the Eastern and the Western. Real creative naming there. But in each of those, there's two different subspecies. So in the Eastern gorillas, there is a lowland species and also a higher mountain species. And then same within the Western. So both Eastern and Western, lowland, highland. That kind of describes where they live. In between the Eastern and Western species, there's a big tract of forest where no gorillas live. That's about 560 miles wide. So between the Eastern and Western species, there's a big space with no gorillas. I don't know if there's chimpanzees in that area. I believe there are, but I don't know. In some places, chimps and gorillas live close to each other. It's rare that they will actually overlap ranges. Gorillas live in family groups called troops. A troop is usually anywhere from 5 to maybe 10 individuals, but it has been observed that a troop can be just 2, and it can be as many as around 50, which is incredible, but pretty rare that it would be quite that big. A troop is led by a dominant adult male. He is referred to as a silverback. As males get older, the hair on their back starts to turn more silverish gray color. And that's typically around the age where he will become a dominant member of his own troop. Now, it is possible he may be a silverback. He may look big and impressive and have silverish gray hair, but he may not be the leader of a family troop. He would not live with a family if that's the case. He would live with other males in a bachelor group setting. Because in a big family group, there's one dominant male, one big adult male. If there's other males there, they are going to be like teenage gorillas or younger. So only one adult male in a family group. The silverback has a lot of responsibility. So he's the leader of his family group. He protects them from any dangers, from predators. He's always on the watch if there's people about, because gorillas really worry more about people than any other animals. And he also helps, he doesn't help decide. He totally makes the decision on where they're going, when they're going to stop to eat, when they're going to stop to rest, and where they're going to sleep during the night. He calls all the shots. It's kind of a little dictator-ish, but it seems to work for gorillas. Like I mentioned, they are the largest of all apes. A big male gorilla can weigh in at 440 pounds. So that's very large. And when they stand upright, when they stand on 2 feet, they can be about 5.5 feet tall. So they can be pretty tall. Females are a bit smaller, standing about 5 feet tall and weighing up to about 220 pounds. So even the females are pretty good sized, especially compared to other ape species. Most of their weight they carry in the bulk of their chest or their midsection of their body, although they also have very huge, long, muscular arms and short, muscular legs. Sorry, there's a plane flying over, so I'm gonna let that pass a little bit so we don't have too much background noise. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between the two species and the 2 subspecies in each group. So we're going to start with the furthest west in Africa. They all kind of live along the middle portion of Africa where there's rainforest, starting at the west coast of Africa and kind of moving about halfway across the African continent. So the furthest western group are they're called the Cross River gorillas. So those are going to be the higher land gorillas. They live across a big river from the others. And they're distinct genetically enough that they are listed as their own subspecies. And this Cross River gorilla group is the least studied and least known about group. They are also the most endangered. They estimate that there are between 200 and 300 individuals left of the Cross River group. And they live in the countries of Nigeria and Cameroon. Specifically, there's good forest habitat right on the border of those 2 countries, Nigeria and Cameroon. And so most of them live in that zone. They were just in the last 20 or 30 years really differentiated as their own subspecies. They are difficult to study because they live kind of in real rugged terrain, and it's a pretty remote forest area. Although at the edges of the forest where they sometimes are seen by people, there's a lot of people in both those areas. Particularly Nigeria has a very large human population, and they keep moving further and further into the forest where the gorillas live. The other western subspecies of gorillas are called the western lowland gorillas. If you have seen a gorilla in zoos, this is the gorilla you have seen. Western lowland gorillas are the only gorillas in most zoos. I believe there's 1 or 2 individuals at zoos in Europe that belong to a different subspecies, but it's really rare that it would be a gorilla other than a western lowland gorilla. I know in the United States they are all western lowland gorillas. Western lowland gorillas are the most numerous and the most widespread of all gorillas. But don't let that fool you. They are still also critically endangered. That's because their population continues to go down, and it's going down at a pretty fast rate. So they actually live in 6 different countries. So they live a little further in from the Cross River gorillas, live in Cameroon and Nigeria. These guys live in Cameroon a little bit, and then also the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guyana, Gabon, and the Republic of the Congo. So they're kind of in a whole cluster of 6 different countries. That is probably good for them in that being spread across multiple governments, multiple countries, they have a little better chance. They don't know exactly how many are out there, but they do know that there are big pockets of forest in their home range that have very healthy gorilla populations, although they are still declining and still threatened with becoming endangered. There is a national park in, I believe it's in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I could be wrong on that, but it's called Dzanga Senga. And it is a very cool forest dwelling national park that has recently gotten some gorillas that are habituated to having people around. So people can go to this national park and kind of hang out in big tree houses and watch gorillas, which is pretty cool. That is the first subspecies other than the mountain gorillas where that is possible. With that, they're using the money that tourists are willing to pay to help improve the national park, to hire more rangers, to train the rangers better, and to better protect the laws that are in place to help the gorillas there. So those are the western lowland gorillas. 560 miles east of that begin the eastern gorillas with the eastern lowland gorillas. These are also sometimes called the Grauers gorilla. That's Grauers. So kind of weird word. That's somebody's name. He helped describe them, so they're named after him. Those are the largest of all gorillas. So they're the eastern lowland gorillas. They live only in one country, and that's the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So you can see as we talk about these different gorillas, some of these countries have two kinds of gorillas, some just have one. So Democratic Republic of Congo actually has three kinds. But it's a huge country. That's also the country where okapis live. We talked a little bit about that in our okapi critter chat last week. The eastern lowland gorillas number about 8,000 individuals. They have pretty good numbers on them because they have been able to document them pretty well. Their population is also declining. They are also critically endangered. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there's been a lot of civil unrest. They've had a big civil war that lasted a long time. They have a lot of different ethnic groups that don't necessarily get along with each other and fight over land rights, and often animals suffer and struggle when there are war conditions going on. And then our final subspecies of gorillas are the mountain gorillas. You may have seen photos or videos of them. They are very well documented as far as a wild population. They live up high elevations, so they live between 8,000 and 13,000 feet up on some big mountains, kind of in the middle of Africa. Most of them live in a place called Virunga National Park. That's a national park that's right on the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda. Now, if you've ever heard of any of those three countries, and if you know anything about them, all three of them have had a lot of civil unrest. So they've all had lots of wars and lots of political trouble during that time. And despite that happening, with these high mountains, they're actually extinct volcanoes. The forest up there has kind of been a good sanctuary for the mountain gorillas. And the population in Virunga National Park has actually gone up, which is really good news. And so because of the increase in population there of mountain gorillas, the mountain gorilla has been downgraded from critically endangered to endangered. So that's some good news on the gorilla front. Mountain gorillas also look quite a bit different than the others. The others have slight differences in like their head shape or the shape of their teeth. Mountain gorillas really look a lot different. They have really long hair, so they look really woolly, really shaggy. Because they live at high elevations where it sometimes gets close to freezing, that longer hair helps keep them warm. The other place they live is in Uganda in a national park called the Bwindi Impenetrable Forest National Park. And just the name alone, Impenetrable Forest, makes it sound like it's really difficult to go see them. And that is the case. I do know people who have seen them. One of the gorilla keepers at the LA Zoo that I worked with, she has been to the place to see mountain gorillas and had some really amazing experiences in doing so. If you're ever interested in doing something along that line, there are definitely some opportunities to do that. It is not cheap, it is not easy, and it can be a little scary because of the political situations going on. So please be careful if you ever consider doing that. It is estimated that there's about 1,000 mountain gorillas, so that's not very many, but the population in both Bwindi Impenetrable Forest and Virunga National Park is going up. With those two populations, they are isolated from each other. There's a big valley in between those mountains in Virunga and the other ones in the forest, and the gorillas do not cross that valley. So it is possible that one or both of the populations could become a little more endangered in the future because of their isolation. But both populations are currently on the rise, although at Virunga National Park there was just an incident where 12 rangers were killed in a military scuffle with a warring tribe situation. So it still can be a very dangerous place for gorillas and for people. So now that we've talked about the 4 different subspecies of gorillas, let's talk a little bit about a gorilla's day-to-day life and kind of what that looks like. So they wake up as a family group. They start to eat some breakfast right around where they had slept the night before. They kind of make little beds or nests every night where they'll take some plants, maybe some branches, some leaves, or some grasses and kind of smash those down into a nice cozy little bed. Babies would sleep right with their mom, and then they wake up in the morning, they gather some food. That would be a variety of different leaves, stems, sometimes some fruits, seeds, or roots, and occasionally some bugs. They like to eat ants and termites. Unlike some other primates that eat those things, chimps are very well documented for eating those. Chimps usually find a very special long piece of grass and dip it in and lick the termites off. Gorillas don't take that time. They don't do tool use. They don't save the termite mound. They just pound on it till they smash it open, and then they eat the bugs up. So yeah, big difference there between gorillas and chimps in how they problem solve. Gorillas, like I said, they live in these family groups. They can live about 35 years out in the wild. In zoos, they typically can live into their 50s, with a couple of individuals having made it into the 60s. They live longer in a zoo because they have medical care. And as they get older, there's people there to help them out or give them medicine to help them feel comfortable. And they're not climbing up and down trees and mountains all day looking for food and dealing with other gorilla scuffles as much. When a mother gorilla becomes pregnant, her gestation or pregnancy is between 8 and 9 months, so not that far different than humans. That is also because gorillas are very closely genetically related to humans. They share 98.3% of our same genetic material. That sounds really crazy, right? It sounds like they're almost just like us. If you've ever watched gorillas long enough, you can tell that there are a lot of similarities in how they behave. When the mom has a baby, the babies are pretty small, between 4 and 5 pounds. That's really small if you think about a human baby. They're usually a bit bigger than that, not always. And twins do happen with gorillas, though it's very, very rare. There have been a couple cases documented both in zoos and a couple in the wild. So it does happen, but it's pretty rare. Like I said, the females weigh between about 150 pounds, males up to 220, males between 300 and 400 pounds. One thing that I found really fascinating about gorillas, I learned this several years ago, and I struggled to figure it out and understand it till I really took the time to look. Gorillas each have a very unique shape to their nose. And it's so unique to the individual that researchers actually use their nose shape to identify different individuals. So next time you're at a zoo with gorillas, take a moment and look at the gorillas and look at their different noses. And if there's signage that exists that shows which gorilla is who, try to identify them by just their nose shape, and you'll be able to figure that out. There's usually other differences you can tell too, especially if it's a small group. One's older, one's bigger, that kind of thing can make a big difference. But when there's a big group together, it's a little tricky to figure out until you look real close at their nose shape. They also have a thumb for a big toe. So on their feet, they can grab things just like we can grab with our hands. They can do that with both their hands and their feet, which makes it very easy for them to gather food as they're walking, particularly if they're in a troop with a very bossy silverback who says it's time to move, and they're going through the forest, and you may be one of the gorillas and you're hungry. You could grab some food with one hand or grab some with a foot and keep walking. That way you stay with the group, but also get some food along the way. Babies will stay with their mom for up to 4 to 6 years, so it's usually about that long of a time frame between when she will have another baby. And sometimes the others in the troop will help take care of the baby. They'll sometimes hold the baby, although that's pretty rare until there's a lot of trust between the mom and like the aunties. And then once the babies are bigger and kind of toddler age, they will definitely play with each other and sometimes hang around with each other quite a bit, although both the moms will usually pay close attention to where both the kids are to help out. So their life in the forest, as you can imagine, their forest is very thick, lots of bushes, lots of trees. They spend most of their time on the ground, although all gorillas are capable of climbing up into trees. And they do on occasion do that out in the wild, though they mostly spend their time on the ground. Kind of depends on the forest and what they're trying to do. They will sometimes cross water, like a river or a stream, but they typically are not good swimmers. They're kind of really heavy because of all their big body mass and muscle, so they can't really swim. So that if they cross a river, it has to be one that's shallow enough that they can wade across the river or cross overhead on a big tree. In the forest, they use a variety of different ways to communicate with each other. So they make a bunch of different types of sounds. One paper that I was reading about that said that they have identified over 25 different sounds that have specific meanings. Some of these are growls, squeaks, kind of a hoot sound. Gorillas tend to be a little bit quieter than, say, like a chimpanzee, but more noisy than, say, an orangutan. So they're kind of in that middle ground if we look at a variety of different apes. Gorilla communication really takes place in nonverbal ways. So it takes place a lot with facial communication. They do a lot of facial expression. A quick look of the eyes can say a lot. We do that a little bit as people, but with gorillas, it's much more known what those looks mean, and they will communicate quickly by glances with their eyes, ways they move their ears, ways they move their mouth. Can all have a big communication impact. And the third way that they communicate is by making sounds like drumming. So they'll sometimes do that on trees. They'll sometimes do that on their chest. I have seen that with gorillas in a zoo. I've seen that with adults, and I've seen it with kids. So gorillas will definitely drum on things to make some noise. That's usually if they want some attention, or if they're kind of trying to assert some dominance. It's real common in bachelor groups where maybe there's several young adult males kind of hanging out together. And that's kind of the social structure too. So if it's a boy gorilla that's born into a troop, he'll stay with his mom right by her side until he's like 4 or 5, and then he'll maybe stay in the troop another 4 or 5 years till he's like 9, 10. And at that point, his dad usually tells him to hit the road. And he'll go off, maybe with a cousin or somebody else from his troop that's that same age, another male. And then they'll kind of just go off and be pals. They may form a bachelor group with another male out there that's maybe an older brother or cousin out there. They may be on their own for up to, they'll sometimes be alone, totally. But they will sometimes hang out in that bachelor group setting for about 10 years till they're closer to like 20 years old. And then they're going to start looking for a troop that they can take over and be a dominant male of a troop. And that doesn't always work out, and sometimes there's some fights between males to see if that works or if that happens or not. It's kind of similar to the social structure of lions. Gorillas and lions kind of share a very similar social structure in that regard. Females usually stay with their troop their whole life. So if she's born into the troop, she stays with her mom, her aunties. She'll stay in that group for most of her life. She may not. There may be a male silverback that she doesn't particularly like, and if she has an issue with him or if she's low ranking, she may take her kid and peace out and go look for a new troop. It can happen. It doesn't always work out very well. Usually it's more like if the troop's really big and there's like 20 or 30 individuals, maybe a whole splinter group, several females will leave, and possibly with another male. Maybe there's another male coming to challenge for dominance, and they'll split off with that guy and form a new troop. Excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about why they are endangered. So of the 4 subspecies, 3 of them are critically endangered. That means that their population is decreasing at a big rate, and scientists and conservationists worry that if things don't change, they could become extinct. The other group that is not critically endangered is endangered. So it's also has a low population and is definitely threatened with some things. But in this case, it's the mountain gorillas. Their population is actually going up, but it's still very low at only about 1,000 individuals. So they face a wide variety of different threats. Some of those would be environmental things, as populations of people continue to grow around the world. There's more need for things like timber, so logging and cutting down the trees in the forest to sell for wood or paper around the world is a big common issue for all forest species. With that, they build big roads to make ways for the timber trucks to get in and cut the trees down. Once roads are in, other people start using those roads, and then they come in and start doing hunting in the forest, maybe some poaching. Occasionally they will try to catch baby gorillas and put them into a pet trade, or try to sell them to rich people who want to buy a baby gorilla. That's also an issue. And then there's also, in the middle of Africa, there's a lot of very valuable minerals. There's some mining for those that goes on. Things like diamonds have caused a lot of problem in Africa. But recently there's something newer that is being mined in the forest areas of Africa, and that is called coltan. Coltan is a mineral that is used in cell phones. It's an alloy, so it's combined with other minerals and used in all cell phones. All cell phones contain coltan. So one way that we can all help out is, one, don't buy a new cell phone every time a new cell phone comes out. Two, when you do get a new cell phone, make sure you recycle your old cell phone. If you recycle it, they can use that coltan to make a new cell phone, and there's companies out there that are doing that. A really good place you can recycle your cell phone is at a zoo or an aquarium that has a program that does that, and most zoos in the US have some sort of program along those lines. That way the zoo gets some money for donating that recycled cell phone to the companies who extract the coltan and other useful parts in building new cell phones. And they can also, it cuts down on waste rather than just throwing it away and having it go into a landfill. The other threat that we already talked a little bit about is civil unrest with wars and a lot of trouble with people. That impacts a lot of animals, especially as some of these armies are sometimes heavily armed and they're out in the middle of nowhere. They need food. They will sometimes shoot things that they're scared of. They will sometimes shoot things because it's there. They will sometimes shoot things to eat them. And there is a little bit of threat with that, especially with the western species of gorillas, where they are sometimes hunted for food or for trinkets. They sometimes make things out of like a gorilla hand or a foot. Big way to make sure you're not supporting that is never buy anything made from wild animals. Don't buy anything of any kind, because if you buy something and you're like, oh, but this was from an antelope, so the gorillas are safe. It's the same people hunting the antelope that are hunting the gorillas, the elephants, all of it. So please don't support wildlife trade of any sort of products like that. The final big threat facing gorillas is disease. Because genetically they are closely related to us, they can get a lot of the same diseases that we can get. That sometimes shows up in very odd and unique ways. In the range of the western lowland gorilla, Ebola is a very big problem in that forest area. That's where we had a big global Ebola scare several years ago in the countries of Cameroon, Nigeria, and some of those other surrounding countries. That's where a big Ebola threat happened, and that did impact the gorillas that were living there as well. There are also other diseases that can be transmitted from people to gorillas out in the wild. It can happen in zoos as well, and it is scary that that can be such a big threat, but it is something that can easily happen with something that is so genetically similar to us. There are many, many conservation organizations doing some really great work with gorillas, so that is some great news. Almost every zoo I know of that houses gorillas is involved in some sort of conservation work. that helps wild gorillas. So there's many out there that are doing a lot of really great work. One that I would like to give a special shout out today is called GRACE. That stands for Gorilla Rehabilitation and Conservation Education. They specifically work in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Again, that's a country that has 3 species of gorillas, and they specifically work with the eastern lowland gorillas, although they're starting to share their knowledge with the other species as well. But what they're doing is they're helping rescue some of the baby gorillas that have been captured and trying to be sold as pets. They rescue them, they bring them back to their sanctuary where they can help rehabilitate them with the goal of eventually being able to release them back into the wild. They also run a clinic where if a gorilla nearby gets hurt or injured, they can use their veterinary skills to help that wild gorilla out. And they're doing a lot of conservation and education work with their local communities. So they're doing a lot of great stuff. I'll be posting some information later today about up on the Facebook group. I also wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with gorillas. When I worked at the Los Angeles Zoo, and especially during the time frame when I was training to be a zookeeper, I did spend a lot of time volunteering and working with the gorilla keepers. I was never actually a gorilla keeper myself, but they are an animal that I absolutely enjoyed working with when I had the opportunity to do so. They're highly intelligent. They pick up very, very quickly on your level of energy. If I seemed scared, they would notice that. They would pick up on that. At the LA Zoo, there's a little old lady gorilla. She's the oldest of their gorillas there. She's in her 40s. She loved to test and tease people who were new. So she loved to pick on me and try to scare me, which was always kind of an exciting time. It was really great, though. They had, at the time I was volunteering there, they had 3 male gorillas, 1 in the family group, and 2 brothers that lived as a bachelor group. And they were all super cool and gentle and easy to work with me. We always worked through a protected barrier. We never were in the same space as them, but we would give them their medicine and vitamins every day. One of the gorillas there had contacted a very terrible disease that's actually very common in Arizona called valley fever. Valley fever is horrifically terrible for gorillas, way worse than it is with people. I know people in Arizona that also have valley fever, and it's not fun for them. But with gorillas, it's almost always deadly. And this gorilla that lives in LA has valley fever. So he's on very important medicine that he must get every day. They mix it in juice, and he drinks it from a cup through the bars at the front of his bedroom. And he was always very cool when I was giving him his juice, which was really amazing to build that bond with him, even though I was pretty new at that time. Recently, the Los Angeles Zoo earlier this year had a baby gorilla born. She's the first baby born there for quite some time, which was very exciting. Her name is Angela. I'll be posting a video and some footage of her and her mom later today. And there are many baby gorillas across the country in other zoos. I believe the Woodland Park Zoo has a baby gorilla. I think the Columbus, Ohio Zoo has a baby gorilla. Maybe it's Cincinnati. It's one of those two. And the zoo that I very first started my zoo career at, Utah's Hogle Zoo, just announced yesterday on Mother's Day that they are expecting a baby gorilla. And that's very big news for them. This is the first baby gorilla they will ever have. It's a first-time mom. So it's very exciting news. They are on baby watch, so they hope to have a baby gorilla in the next few weeks. Because their gestation period's has a little leeway of a couple weeks on each side. They're not quite to the due date yet, but it's possible she could have her baby very soon. So that's always very exciting. Baby gorillas are super adorable. They cling to their mom's chest when they're first born for about the first 2 or 3 months. Then they start to ride on her back for about the next 6 months. And then once they're about 9 months to a year old, they start to kind of walk around on their own a little more. And if you ever have seen gorillas that are like 3 years old, that is the best. They are so fun to watch, especially if they have a cousin or a sibling that's around that same age. They're really great to watch interact with each other. Years ago, I was at the Bronx Zoo in New York and saw or toddler gorillas playing with each other, and we watched them for over an hour because it was just hysterical to see how they played with each other. So I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you today about gorillas. I'll be posting some more things up on the Facebook profile later today. As always, feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and share any of the Zoo Nerd content. And full episodes will be uploaded across Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube later today. So I look forward to tomorrow. Until then, be happy, be healthy, stay safe. I'll see you then. Bye.